Hello again. This is our last module, our last content video for the semester, and we're going to conclude with a concept that you are probably quite familiar with, and that is using a series of pitches to compose. And again, as we talked about in the last module video, that sometimes relying upon systems like this allow us to free ourselves of the need to come up with every single decision. Sometimes it's helpful to devise a system that will give us certain components of your piece, and ordering our pitches is one way to do so, especially in the 20th century when composers were very individualized. Their techniques were very much their own. People were looking for new ways to kind of make their own path. And so the most famous, of course, composer to do this in a 12-tone series is Arnold Schoenberg. But I want to kind of emphasize that we don't need to utilize all 12 pitches to make a series. We can make a series out of 5 pitches, out of 7, out of 6, so that we have a sound that we're looking for. If we use all 12 pitches, the full chromatic scale, we have a saturation of pitch space so that it sounds completely chromatic and avoids all tonal really attributes. But what I'd like to emphasize is that we can use this kind of system and this tool to be expressive musically and to still retain a tonal center while also still using a series. And so that's what I'm going to emphasize today in our discussion of a series. We're not going to listen to any Schoenberg. I'm not going to recommend you listen to any Schoenberg. Nothing against him and his music, but just to emphasize that particular music gets kind of a reputation. And other composers have used series of all kinds in different ways, and I'm going to encourage us to listen to them. So some background information about serialism. This is from our slides that I'll post on D2L. But we're going to compose a series that will be used to generate a piece or a sketch for a piece. And your series actually, I don't think, should be 12 tones. And we're not going to make a matrix or any of that stuff. We're just going to think about an ordered set of pitch classes. And if pitch classes are new to us, we can kind of simply think about them as a note. So if a note is not in a key, we don't necessarily need to rely on enharmonics. Like, so for instance, A sharp. A sharp is very useful in the key of B minor. But it's also the same note as B flat, and as a B flat or an A sharp in a non-tonal, sort of work, that kind of means the same thing. So we use the term pitch class to denote all enharmonics and all transpositions. All enharmonics and all octaves of a note. We utilize a number system to symbolize pitch classes, and we assume that C is 0. So if C is 0, then D is 2 because it's 2 half steps from C. C sharp or D flat is 1, D is 2, E flat is 3, F natural is 4, F sharp, E natural is 4, F is 5, and so on. And you can kind of go up through the chromatic scale and find that 6 is F sharp or the tritone away from C. The 11th pitch is B natural. 10th pitch is B flat, and so on. We create sets of pitches or pitch classes to create a sound, right? So the C major triad would be C, E, and G. And in a non-tonal environment, we might consider those to be 0, 4, and 7, right? We can symbolize that sound because we can see between 0 and 4 is 4 half steps, and between 4 and 7 is 3 half steps. So we're thinking about the intervallic properties of these sounds. So if notes are numbers, then we can transpose them by adding a value to them. We don't have to think about major thirds, minor thirds, perfect fourths. Those are all valid constructs, but we can just simply say we're going to take our 047 trichord and move it up by a half step and add 1 to it. So it would be 158, right? And that simply makes us change to a new set of numbers. So transposition is simply adding an interval value to all members of a set, right? So if we have any set, which is 0, 2, 0, 2, 3, we can add a number to that whole set to make them go up a minor third and so on and so forth. If we're thinking about sets as being collections of intervals, we can reverse the direction of intervals between notes to become an inversion. So we can say from 0 to 2 is a whole step up, but we can also say 0 to 10 is a whole step down, right? Or 2 semitones down. It's going in the opposite direction. We can basically order a set of pitches in a particular row to create a series, and doing so gives us an original row form that we're going to use as our basis. We can also think of it as having a backwards orientation. We can invert the intervals starting from the same place to create the inversion, and we can read the inversion backwards. So that's 4 basic forms of our series. And a series can actually be of any amount of notes, but they must be ordered. They must be used in an order, and that order must be preserved. The idea is that we are composing a row. We are composing a series, right? That series is something that we've decided on, and we should preserve that in the piece. So let's look at an example from literature from non-Schoenbergian example. This is actually a very nice piece by John Tavener. I've decided not to play this during the video. I think that takes up a lot of time, and the link is up on D2L so that I'm not making massive videos. So please do seek out the recording of this that I've linked on D2L. It sounds very good and is not atonal necessarily. So if we look at this first line, very simple melody, right? The notes here go up a major third, up 4 semitones, down 2 semitones, down 3 semitones, and then up a half step. His series, even though we repeat A, it's okay. We're just not going on to a different pitch until after that point. So what he has here is a presentation of the first row and with its own inversion. So we can see that from going from G to B is a major third up, or 4 semitone. And then the altos go down a major third against itself, right? So it's converging upon G, or diverging from G. I'm sorry, screwing up playback. Right? It's moving in contrary motion by exact intervals, right? So that would be the inversion of this row, right? So going to this slide, we can kind of see this a little bit better. This is going up 4 semitones, down 2 semitones, down 3 semitones, and up 1. And this is going in the opposite direction, down 4, up 2, up 3, minus 1. So this is an inversion of the soprano line because the direction is reversed. Later in the piece, we have the soprano presenting this line. I'll play it an octave down so I have more room. Okay, and it's reversed. So he's presenting a prime version of the row with its own retrograde, right? It's presented backwards. So if this is our original form, this is its retrograde. Meaning it's presented backwards. And it just so happens that these intervals are reversed and in opposite directions. Since the phrase in measure 1 is only a fragment of the one in measure 3 and 5, it is the standard or prime segment from which all the phrases are derived. And then later, we have all 4 of the row forms that I explained earlier in the same moment. So in between measures 5 and 7. So these are presented in this kind of a rhythmic way in this piece. And again, I urge you to listen to it be performed professionally, because I'm trying to play it and I'm not excellent at the piano as much as I should be. Darn it. Right? And it sounds kind of nice, and still not quite in a major. It's not necessarily in a major key or anything. It's kind of in its own pitch space, because he defined this row form in his own way to make this sound, and he liked the way that it inverted with itself. He liked the way it sounded as 2 phrases, one that reverts the other, and he composed this row as 7 pitches, right? And that number means something to him as a divine number of 7. Also, it implies some sort of G as a center, right? And remember that G itself, pitch-wise, if you start with C, G is also 7. So there's this connection between the G as a pitch 7 and then having 7 pitches in the row. So this example is, I think, really good because it's not a 12-tone set. It's not a really hard piece to listen to. It's not super atonal and difficult and boxy. It's a very beautiful piece for choir that was written in the 1980s that is approachable, and it demonstrates really clearly these row forms in a very early part of the piece. It's not buried in the music either, which is nice. So we label row forms according to their first number here. So a row number is 7. And this is just sort of practice for those of us who work with rows a lot, that the retrograde is named after its last number, and that's because it's literally the same thing as prime but backwards. Our inversion is also labeled as against this first number, and then the retrograde of the inversion is this way. So you can see how if we look at these numbers, these are pitch class numbers, right? So this is G, this is B natural, this is A, this is F sharp, this is E flat, and this is F natural, and this is A flat, okay? So what do we notice about prime and inversion? If we look at these 2 numbers and add them together, 7 plus 7 equals 14. And remember, we have to think about things mod 12, right? But we're basically coming up with the same value. So 7 plus 7 is 14. 11 plus 3 is 14. 9 plus 5 is 14. 6 and 8. So these all add up to a constant value of 14. Remember that for when we're actually composing and inverting a row, because our pitches will then become, our inversions will be provided to us if we think about a constant value. So I already discussed this, that where 12-tone serialism comes from, and we're not actually going to go there. These slides are from a different class that did go there, and has some examples of stepping through all 12 pitches in a piece, but we're not necessarily going to do that. We're going to stop right here, and our assignment is going to be derived from this. So let's look at our first assignment here, down here in writing a series. You're going to open up this worksheet and print it off, and or you can, if printing is a hardship, you can simply recreate this on a piece of staff paper, or however you wish to get the job done is fine, as long as you're doing what's asked of the assignment. So you're going to create a prime series. You're going to compose a row. So remember that your row should be meaningful to you in some way. You can derive it in all kinds of ways. You can symbolize whatever relationships of numbers you want to, or notes, or if you want it to be very tonal, you can involve a major triad or something to that effect. But it should be between 6 and 12 pitches. try to make your series meaningful or interesting in some way. So you're composing this row. So you're putting in intervals that you want in your piece into the row, right? List all pitch class integers below each note. Remember that C equals 0, C sharp and D flat equals 1, and so on. And I have an example on the next page. Then complete the rest of the series types. List all pitch class integers below each note. Okay, so you're going to compose your prime row. And, whole notes is fine, however you want to do it. And then list your pitch integers underneath. Then you're going to basically write it backwards and then provide pitch integers backwards as your retrograde version. And then your prime is going to be inverted here. And we'll talk about how to do that. And then you'll write your retrograde after that. Let's see. So creating a series. So this is the example I'm providing. So this is from our John Tavener piece. Okay. And note that I have 7, 11, 9, 6, 3, 5, and 8 as the pitch integers. And so I'm asking you to do that mostly because it's easy to find your inversion that way. Okay, you don't have to calculate every interval by half steps. You can just use this property of equivalency. So 7 plus 7 equals 4. If you know that your first number added to itself is a certain number, let's say you start on G. G is 7, so 7 times 2 is 14. You know that your value that you need to come up with is 14. So 14 minus 11 is 3. So that's an E flat. 14 minus 9 is 5. 14 minus 6 is 8. Excuse me. And so on and so forth. So I hope that's pretty clear. I think numerically it works pretty nicely. If you want to work intervallically, that's fine too, meaning if you know that this is a major third and then you need to go down a major third. So note that this is chromatic and we're thinking about exact intervals here. And of course, if you have questions, please be in touch. And then your retrograde inversion is going to be the reverse ordering of your inversion. So it's just going to simply be the same thing, just written backwards. And so once you compose this, you're going to turn it into that Dropbox, and then you'll use it to generate the next assignment, which is a sketch of music that utilizes your row forms. So your 2 sketches. So it says 2 1-minute sketches that utilize the patterns that you generated in the previous module 3 assignments in unique ways. Each sketch must have 2 layers in piano texture, right hand versus left hand. Each layer must use a unique pitch pattern that you generated in some way and a unique rhythmic pattern that you generated. You will cycle through each pattern independently to generate your musical content. However, you will also have to make musical decisions about tempo, dynamics, range, register, articulations, and the like to make it as musical as possible. So what you're doing is you can use a notation program, or you can handwrite it and play it. Whatever you choose to do, you're applying the notes maybe from your series. So as for an example, you can use the series. Oops, that's not the right PDF. You can use the notes from your series. Say you want to go through prime, and then you can apply it to the rhythms that you composed in assignment 2. That might be one layer. You can cycle through your cryptograms, the chords from your cryptograms, and apply them to the rhythmic patterns. And you're just basically putting them into a document so that you have chords and notes in a piano texture. Excuse me. I'll try to look for some previous examples from students, but basically you're just trying to create 1-minute short examples or trying this out. You may not love what you come up with, right? But the idea is that the notes and rests that you make, or the notes and rhythms that you make, is just the starting point. Composing also includes all the good stuff, meaning tempo, dynamics, articulations. Those things matter so much to composing a piece of music that the notes and rhythms are, yes, they're important, but they're not as structural sometimes. So using those 2 layers, you'll come up with 2 layers that may or may not be absolutely performable, but you can always edit them down to be, right? And you can simplify in a texture and make it your own. And so, but what you're doing is you're composing 2 short sketches of 1 minute each and uploading a PDF of the score and an audio file to the Dropbox, right? So if you're using MUS score, for instance, you can notate it in there and then export a PDF and an audio file and pop them in the Dropbox for each sketch. And in the comments, I'm going to ask you to briefly describe how you compose them, so the origins of each layer and for each sketch. So say sketch 1 uses prime row form and rhythm number 1. Let's say the left hand uses the cryptogram from my kids and the rhythm number 3. So you could put them together in however you wish, right? And so that's just a sort of a testing of the theory and seeing if things work for you. And so don't be afraid if it's awesome or not. Hopefully it is awesome and you can edit it to make it kind of awesome. But the idea is that you're just kind of putting things together and making sounds happen and taking a chance. If you have any questions about these 2 assignments, definitely reach out. I hope it's entertaining and fun for you, and a new way of thinking about composing music perhaps that might lead to new understandings and new things. So if you have any questions, please be in touch.